All right, everybody, welcome back to a very special episode of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. You guys have seen Jack Eden before, but he will be coming on for a second time. I like to consider him our NBA expert, so he's got a lot to say about the recent free agency moves and the NBA draft. Ryan and I will also be talking about with Jack some NFL games as well. So, Ryan, I'll hand it off to you to get us started.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, so I wanted to start off just talking about the NBA and more specifically the NBA draft. Now, we've had a lot happen in the NBA over the last week with the draft and then free agency right after. I just wanted to start off by asking each of you, a player that you think that you really liked from the draft, a player that you thought fits really well with the team or was picked in the right spot. And a player you just want to keep an eye on going into the season. So I know you just handed off to me, Trevor, but I actually want to ask Jack if that's okay. Our NBA
Go
expert
ahead. Yeah,
here.
go ahead.
Jack, is there a player that you want us to keep an eye on, a player that you think is going to be really good this year or just in his career?
Um, I mean, I feel like I got to start with my bias here.
Okay.
Sadiq Bey out of Villanova. Obviously, I go there. Um, so I've loved him. I watched him a lot last year, and he's a really good player. And I was very surprised that he fell to 19 in the draft. I thought he was definitely. I thought at minimum he was going to be a lottery pick, and he was in the conversation for the Phoenix Suns at 10, which I would have been very excited about. But I still really enjoy what we did so far in the draft and in free agency. But I think he's just a solid player. Like all those Villanova guys, they know how to shoot, they know how to pass, they know how to rebound, they just know how to play basketball. So that's I think just from that aspect, Sadiq can really do a lot of things that can help a team, especially a young team like the Pistons are going to be this year, compete. And I also think with their lack of depth there, he's going to get a lot of playing time this year. So I'm very excited to watch him, both as a Villanova fan and an NBA fan. I think he's in a good situation there where he can play. And then also, I do have to bring up LaMelo Ball. Um, I thought it was
Okay.
very interesting for him to go to Charlotte, and I think, especially with that like ego and that family, obviously, sending him to a place like Charlotte's going to be very interesting. But I think it's clearly and obviously his team there. Um, I like I don't like the Gordon Hayward signing for the money that they gave him, but I think that signing in general is going to help push them to be a team that competes for a playoff spot this year. And I just think I think it's going to be his team to lead, so I'm excited to see what he does.
Yeah, there you go. That's some good stuff. I wanted to comment on LaMelo and going to Charlotte because I, honestly, I get they had to pick him because there's this draft is kind of strange in terms of there's not a lot of high end talent. I mean, I don't know if you disagree, Jack, but I feel like this draft didn't have like a definitive number one. It was kind of just you had Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, and Ball all up there, and for Charlotte to take him, I think that was fine. But they have a fair amount of guards, right? They have Devontae Graham, right? They have Terry Rozier, and they also right signed Hayward. And we can get into this a little bit later because I want to talk about Hayward a little later with free agency. But I just feel like there's a lot of guys on that team that need the ball. Like they need to handle the ball to do what they do. And I just don't know, especially I just don't know if like a guy like Rozier like really fits with what they're trying to do. We'll see. But I don't know if I like what Charlotte's doing. I just wanted to point that out. For me, I'm going to be biased here. I'm going to talk about the player that my Cleveland Cavaliers drafted in this NBA draft, Isaac Okoro. I really had to point him out, an Auburn alum. I like to see that. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think that a lot of people have said, if he pans out, he can be like a guy like, and this is if he pans out, a guy like Iguodala type player in like, back in his heyday, in his prime, a guy who can defend really well, a guy he's sort of a slasher. He can get to the paint on his own at will. And he does struggle from three. He shot around 30%, a little below 30%, actually, I think, in his freshman season, but he improved in the first half of the season. He shot about 20% from three. In the final half, he shot about 33%. So there's improvement there. And I think for a guy like that at 19 years old, I think that's really good to see that improvement. So I'm really looking forward to what he can do with Cleveland because they need the defense. I mean, Sexton and Garland, both undersized. We needed some defensive help. So I think those are really good draft pick.
I completely agree. I was going to mention Okoro myself. I think he's an absolute steal. Not steal, but a great pick by the
Yeah.
Cavaliers, but you did a good job covering that. I want to talk about a couple guys. One, I want to mention Tyrese Halliburton,
Mm.
the 6'6" combo guard out of Iowa State. I think getting him at 12 for the Sacramento Kings was an absolute steal. I like how he plays. I like his versatility on the offensive end. I like his size. And I think him and De'Aaron Fox in the backfield is going to be a very strong combo for years to come. Another pick I absolutely love is Obi Toppin to the New York Knicks. I know he's not a very good defender, but with his size and his versatility on offense, that was hard to pass up. And for him to fall to them at 8, and especially Obi being from New York, I also love that pick as well. And I have one surprise pick in the second round that I think people should keep an eye on, and that's Cassius Winston of Michigan State, drafted 53rd overall. He's one of those, typical college players that you might not think is going to translate well to the NBA, but every once in a while, one of those 4-year guys ends up being a surprise in the NBA. We saw Peyton Pritchard of Oregon also get drafted. I'd like to keep an eye on him as well. But I like how Cassius Winston played at college. I think he's a great leader, and he was coached under Tom Izzo, one of the all-time greats. So I wouldn't be surprised if his game translated well to the NBA.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, we'll see what happens. I know he was really good at Michigan State. I wanted to ask you guys, being from Arizona, before we moved on, I wanted to ask both of you what you thought of the Suns draft pick. So Jack, I don't know. I just wanted your quick thoughts on, what you thought of the pick at number 10.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I knew going into this offseason, there was a high chance we were going to lose Aaron Baines, and we needed some front court depth behind DeAndre Ayton. So, I mean, I was following Gambo on Twitter before the draft and just seeing what he was looking at. And I always saw Jalen Smith's name coming up. I'd heard of him being from Maryland, and he had been in the draft process last year, and then he decided to go back to school for a second year. But I didn't know a ton about him. I knew he had size. I knew he could shoot. And I think that was one of the things that Baines did really well for us last year was he was a guy who could rebound, who could protect the rim, and who could shoot. And I think I really like the pick. I think it was a little early, not going to lie. I would have preferred to trade down and get him a little bit. But I think, I have a lot of faith in James Jones this year, and I think what he did for our team last year was very helpful. So I think you got to have some faith in James Jones. I felt like we were in a similar situation last year when we drafted Cam Johnson at 11, another guy I didn't know a ton about who I thought we could have traded down and grabbed, but he turned out to be a key contributor to the Suns' bubble run this year. So I'm hoping for the same from Jalen Smith. I think I'm excited for him, definitely. And I know Trevor's definitely excited.
All right, yeah, Trevor,
I couldn't agree more.
What do you think?
I boldly think he's the next Anthony Davis. That's a slight joke.
Okay.
No, but I agree with what Jack just said there. Losing Baines, you're going to need some front court depth, and that's exactly what Jalen Smith is. And he does play a very similar style to Aaron Baines. Baines was able to hit that occasional three if left open. Jalen Smith can do that as well. I think he was slightly over 30% in college, which isn't great, but isn't terrible. I like his size. I like that he wears goggles. I think the 4 eyes thing will help him out a lot. And it might have been an overdraft, but you know what? This draft is so muddy as is. It's hard to say someone was overdrafted or underdrafted until we really see them play, because there wasn't a clear, as Ryan already said, there wasn't a clear top level. So we'll see. I like the pick. I think it fitted our needs perfectly. It might have not been the best overall player on the board at the time, but I think we're in a position where, our free agent signings were more important than, this draft pick. So.
Yeah, I mean,
I do quickly want to say I love his stroke, and from watching his highlights, like he has probably one of the smoothest strokes I think I've ever seen, and that's coming from a 6'10". He's a 6'10" center.
He's basically Kevin Durant and Anthony Davis all in one.
If he is, I would love to pick, but I'm excited. I'm excited
too.
No, it should be good. I wanted to say that, I think Trevor's right. I kind of wanted to say I think that the Suns are at the point now where you kind of pick a player that best fits your team at this moment in time, not necessarily the best player available. And that's clearly what they did. And while Jack's probably right, and, they could have probably traded down, they just went with the safe option and took the player they thought would help them most this season and in the future, the player that fit them best. And, Jack's right. He shoots really well from 37% in college. And we'll see what happens with him. I do know that he needs to get stronger, is what I've heard. That he's, he needs to, add some weight or just add some muscle. But to improve on the defensive end. But outside of that, I don't really know too much about him. So we'll see what happens, though. He seems like he'd be a good
one more thing on the Suns pick. there were other guys available there who I would have liked. I would have liked Tyrese Halliburton.
Mm.
That he would have been a nice fit in the future to be groomed behind CP3. But I do also want to say that I think our goal this season is to make the playoffs and to make the playoffs comfortably. So I do like the fact that we're not thinking about picking someone for the future. We're thinking about picking someone who's going to help us help contribute to the team right now. And I think that shows Devin Booker specifically that this is our goal and we're not waiting around anymore. So I do like that fact that we picked the big that we needed over the guard that we could have had in a couple of years.
Yeah. Jack, I wanted to ask you one other thing. Trevor and I talked about this last week. We talked a lot about the Chris Paul trade. We talked a lot about what the Suns did there. And, we kind of disagreed on, a little bit on the trade and if it was really the best decision. And I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were, with the trade. Was it the right decision now? Was it worth it to trade for Chris Paul?
Yes.
I do think we gave up a lot, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I think the trade was worth it.
Okay.
You saw what CP3 did with the Thunder last season. He single-handedly built that culture and made them into a playoff team, and they competed. They almost won Game 7 against the Rockets, which would have been an incredible upset. I do think Rubio was a great fit next to Booker, but I think CP3 is going to be an even better fit next to Booker. And the one thing I love most about this trade is not the fact that you're teaming up Chris Paul and Devin Booker, but instead the fact that you're teaming up Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. I think he's going to benefit the most from playing with Chris Paul. Their pick and roll game is going to be lights out. I think CP3 is a master of the pick and roll. He's going to just give so much wisdom to DeAndre Ayton and really help him grow a ton as a player. Also, it hurts to lose Kelly Oubre. But on an expiring deal, when we had our wings, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, blow up in the bubble, I think it was a loss that we were willing to take.
I agree with everything with what Jack just said there. I'm actually going to build off the CP3 Ayton point real quick. And what is, as a Suns fan, my biggest complaint with DeAndre Ayton is his lack of intensity, his lack of physicality. And I think Chris Paul is one of the most gritty, physical, tough-minded NBA players there is. And I think he's going to bring that out of DeAndre Ayton. And I think if he does bring that out of DeAndre Ayton, Kendrick Perkins actually said this on ESPN. He thinks DeAndre Ayton can be an all-star this year. And I don't know if I think he'll be an all-star this year, but I think DeAndre Ayton, if he can really develop and become physically a tough-minded guy and want the ball and want to score and not settle for those dumbass 15-foot fadeaway jump shots all the time, I think Jack's right. DeAndre Ayton will benefit a ton playing with Chris Paul. And I think people are going to really see, Devin Booker doesn't get a lot of national televised games. People saw it a little bit in the bubble, but people are going to see why Devin Booker is a superstar in this league this year. I think Devin Booker might average 28 to 30 a night this season, and I'm not joking. He is an absolute stud, and I think Chris Paul is going to bring that out of him even more.
Interesting. Yeah, I wanted to say one thing, and Trevor, you mentioned something that I like, and it's for all teams in the NBA, and a lot of teams do this, and it's smart for teams to do this. The one reason that the Chris Paul trade was good is I think you're right. He's a very gritty player. He's gonna encourage these players on the Suns to work harder, not only in games but in practice as well. And I think that's really important. Yeah, it's really important for players like Ayton, who throughout their careers, especially even in college, they've been called out for having a lack of motivation, right, or a lack of effort at times. So yeah, you're right. That's definitely a really good underrated aspect of a trade such as that a lot of people don't really think about or see. And I'm sorry, but I wanted to say that's something that I want the Cavaliers, my team, is starting to do as well. With Okoro, he's a really hard worker. That's his trait. And pairing with Sexton, a guy who's also an extremely hard worker, I think it helps build a culture with the team. And the Suns did a really good job of that with the Chris Paul trade as well, though. So I just wanted to point that out.
I want to transition a little bit. Stay on the Suns for a little bit because I think the Suns have had a very intriguing offseason. And as much as I love the Chris Paul trade, I almost love the signing of Jay Crowder even more. And I know, Jack, you were very high on this signing as well. Jay Crowder fits us perfectly. 3-and-D. He can guard anyone he can guard guys like Anthony Davis. He can guard guys like Giannis. As good as anyone can guard Giannis and Anthony Davis. He's a great defensive asset. He's a three-point asset. I love the signing. We got him for $10 million a year. That's not too expensive, in my opinion. I don't think that's ridiculous. I don't know. I love the signing. I think he fits us perfectly. And looking at the starting five, I'll hand this off to Eden in a second. Chris Paul, Booker, Bridges, Jay Crowder, DeAndre Ayton. And then you got Cam Johnson, Jalen Smith, Dario Saric, Javon Carter coming off the bench. This is a deep Suns team and a very versatile Suns team. I'll hand it to you to talk a little bit more, Eden, but I loved the Jay Crowder signing as much as the Chris Paul trade.
Yes, I got to echo everything that Trevor just said. I love
Thank
the
you.
Jay Crowder signing. I remember, I think we were talking about the bubble on the first podcast I was on, and I said, watch out for the Heat. And sure enough, they ended up making it to the NBA Finals. I think Jay Crowder was a huge part of that team. And I mean, I think everyone on that team, Butler, Crowder, Iguodala, they all had the same mindset of starting on the defensive end and then going from there. I love the fact that he's coming to Phoenix. I think he can play the 3 or the 4. He can guard any guy on the floor. He's a big body. He can rebound. He's just going to be a savvy vet and do his job and really just help this team win games any way that he can. We don't need the guys who are going to score 20 points a game. We don't need the guys who are going to do assists and get under guys' skin and stuff like that. We just need guys who, like Jay Crowder, are going to be team players. You need to knock down a 3. He can knock down a big shot. If you need to get a stop, put him on the ball. He can get a stop. I'm very excited for Jay Crowder. I think that was a perfect signing. The fact that he chose us over other teams like the Dallas Mavericks, the Indiana Pacers, whoever else was going after him. I think that shows a lot of faith in what we're building. And I think, like I said before, you got to trust James Jones. And I love what he's done in 2 off seasons.
There you go. I mean, I think it's great when you can trust your GM, as a fan of a team. I think that just inspires a lot of confidence, and from the players as well in the organization. But I want to talk about this. You're talking about this signing. I'll talk about it really briefly. For me, it's a great signing. No doubt about it. I think it's important, though, that he plays at the same level he did in Miami, because it's strange to me, because I was thinking about his time in Cleveland, because that's when I watched him the most. And he was really, really bad. He didn't put in full effort. He didn't shoot well. He shot like 30% or something from 3. And it's important to note, he shot 44% from 3 in Miami. I mean, that's unbelievable. That's perfect, what you want from a 3-and-D player. So if the Suns can get that out of Jay Crowder, I mean, this is a beautiful, beautiful signing. But in the first 45 games, he did shoot 29% from 3 with the Grizzlies. So it's really interesting to me, like the disparity between those numbers. I feel like it's more of I don't know, it's more of a culture thing. I don't really know. It's a coaching thing. But there's a really big difference in the numbers there. So I find that interesting. So if the Suns can get that Miami level production out of them, it's fantastic without a doubt. But I wanted to move more towards just the general
I want to make one final point.
Okay, sure, Trevor. You can make a fine. Yeah, that's fine.
I told Ryan and Eden I have a bold prediction for the Suns off the air.
Okay.
And that is the Phoenix Suns will finish top 5 in the West and will win a playoff series this season.
I'd love that. Trevor.
Trevor, I'll counter that and say the Suns will sneak in as maximum the 7th seed, and they'll lose in the first round. The problem is, and we won't get too into this, the West is the West is stacked. The worst team in the West, barring injury, are the Sacramento Kings, and they're really not that bad of a team. I mean, they have De'Aaron Fox, they have Buddy Hield, they have some players there.
You'll see.
They're no Bulls. I mean, the Bulls have Zach LaVine. My point is, they're no absolutely terrible team. So outside of them, the T-Wolves,
this is what's going to happen.
Have Anthony Towns and Russell. There's a lot of good teams in the West.
The West is going to come down to coaching and who can get a stop. And that's exactly why you bring in guys like Chris Paul and Jay Crowder. And Monty Williams is an excellent head coach. I absolutely love Monty Williams. I love the hire when we hired him last year. It's going to come down to coaching and some defense. And I think the Suns have brought in the defense with the coaching.
There you go. That's key. You are right. We will see what happens with the Phoenix Suns. We'll see if Trevor's prediction, comes to fruition later this season. It's going to be interesting to watch that. But yeah, so I wanted to move on and just ask you guys, were there any general, outside of the Suns, any free agents that you thought were, teams, got with a good fit or a good price, or free agents that you thought were an overpay or a bad fit, either of those. So, Jack or Trevor, either of you can take this. Give me a player you want to talk about.
I'm actually going to talk about a team, actually, not just one individual player.
That's fine.
And I want to talk about the Atlanta Hawks. I think the Atlanta Hawks have had a terrific offseason. They brought in Danilo Gallinari, Rajon Rondo, and I think they just got Bogdan Bogdanovic as well,
Yes,
if
they
I'm not
did.
mistaken. Okay.
They did just get him.
So now you look at this team, they got Clint Capella as well at the trade deadline last year from the Rockets. This Hawks team looks like a real team with Trae Young, Danilo Gallinari, Clint Capella. I mean, and Bogdan Bogdanovic. I think the Hawks have had a fantastic, and I guess this is from the trade deadline on last year where they got Clint Capella. They've done a fantastic job. And watch out for Atlanta. I mean, I don't think they'll be a contender in the East, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were a playoff team this year. And I think overall they've just had a fantastic offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Jack, sorry, do you want to go ahead? I don't want to.
I mean, I didn't really have anything. I'm very
Yeah.
interested to see what 76ers continue to do. I like the fact that they got rid of both Al Horford and Josh Richardson. They brought in Seth Curry. They really needed to improve the shooting on that team. I think they're part of the way there. And then who knows what's going to happen with the James Harden situation. But they're one of the teams that I think, again, Daryl Morey is a guy who knows how to build a team in this league. You got to trust the guys like that who are running your roster. And I think while they're still shelling out the big bucks to everyone over there, I think they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree with that. They also got Danny Green, who I know he's aging, but he is definitely, he was a good player to get on an expiring deal. I believe they
can't
got
shoot
him.
anymore, but that's okay.
Okay, I mean, I'm not. We don't have to get into that. I know he didn't perform great in the finals or in the playoffs, but I wanted to talk about the Hawks because Trevor Brent mentioned them, and I want to talk about a different signing for the Hawks. I want to talk about Chris Dunn, and I think that that's a really kind of underrated signing for the Hawks because Chris Dunn is a guy that's pretty much the antithesis of Trae Young. Chris Dunn is a really, really good defender at the point guard position, and Trae Young is one of the worst defenders in NBA history, at least so far in his career. So a guy with like Chris Dunn backing him up. I know they also got Rajon Rondo to back him up, but Chris Dunn, I really think that's a perfect fit because they needed defense. No one in that starting lineup last season provided really any defense. And I just think that was a really good signing. I think that Gallinari was a really nice signing as well. And I do think they overpaid for Bogdanovic. Although I feel like a lot of big contracts have come out of this offseason. I wanted to mention the Gordon Hayward contracts. I thought that was way too much money. And I know Trevor, and I'm sure I think Jack, I mean, they can touch on this if they'd like, but I know that, Trevor mentioned me off the air that he thinks that that Charlotte could be a borderline playoff team or fight for a playoff spot this year. And while I think that's true, I think that the signing of Hayward kind of doesn't really match up with what their timeline is. And that was my argument with Chris Paul, but I think looking back on it with the Suns, that's not so bad because they want to help Booker out and get him to the playoffs after all these years. But with Charlotte, Hayward's an aging guy who they're now paying $30 million a year, and I just think he went there, and the money they paid him number one or number two option money, and I just don't know if he'll even be the number one or number two option. I mean, he might be the number two behind Ball, but you have Graham and Rozier there as well, who also want the ball. So I just feel like I've talked about this earlier when we talked about their draft pick, but I just think that there's a lot of guys that need the ball, and I just don't really know if that signing with that much money fits their timeline of what they're trying to do. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I'll go ahead, I guess.
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
Quickly, just to add on to the Atlanta Hawks, I love the pick of Onyeka Okongwu.
Yes.
I think that's a great add, another great defensive piece there to kind of complement John Collins. I don't know if he's going to start or come off the bench behind Capella. I feel like they have a lot of pieces there. I'm not necessarily sure how they're all going to fit together, but I think they have the young talent at least to compete for a playoff spot this year. And then to add on to the Gordon Hayward discussion, I did think that money was astronomical, the amount that he got paid. When I first found out he was opting out of his $33 million player option, I was confused for a second, but when you're getting money like that, it makes sense. He's still not a bad player. He averaged 17 and 6, I think, last year on Boston, who had a lot of players. He's still a good player. I think this contract is going to look similar to the Batum contract, who they just waived. 4 years down the line, you're going to be like, why are we paying this guy $30 million again? But I really do think he's a veteran who knows how to win. and you can slide him along in there alongside Ball and Devontae Graham. And I really do think that they can compete for a playoff spot this year.
I agree. I think they will be a playoff team. I think they'll be a 7 or 8 seed. Them in Atlanta have made a lot of moves this offseason to bolster that roster. And people forget Charlotte they have a team. And the Hayward signing is a little odd. I would have been okay with this signing if it wasn't for 4 years. If this was a 2-year signing, I would have been okay with it, even the money they paid him. But I feel like 4 years is just a little too long to have him there, especially when you have so many young guys that are developing. I really like Devontae Graham. He showed out a little bit last year. People don't talk about PJ Washington a lot, but he's a nice young player as well. They obviously have LaMelo. I think for them at this point, I don't know if they want to bring Rozier off the bench or if they want to start Rozier with LaMelo. I would try and move Terry Rozier. I would try and get a draft pick for him. I would try and get something for him. He just doesn't seem to fit that team, especially bringing in LaMelo Ball, and you already have Devontae Graham as well.
Yeah.
What else were we talking about? Were we just talking about Charlotte there?
Yeah, I mentioned it. I mentioned Atlanta, who you started talking about. But yes.
I actually want to then switch gears. I do like Charlotte. I actually want to mention one more team in free agency that I think has done an absolute fantastic job as well.
I know you're going to say.
And that's Portland. Portland's had a fantastic offseason. They brought back Enes Kanter for some big, front court depth. They brought in Robert Covington. We've talked a lot about the 3 and defense guys. Robert Covington is a perfect 3-and-D example.
Yes.
They re-signed Rodney Hood, who I think is going to be great for their bench depth. And people haven't talked about this guy a lot, but they got a freak athlete in Derrick Jones Jr., who played a bench role on that Miami team. And I like Derrick Jones for the athleticism and the defense he can bring. So overall, I think Portland's had a fantastic offseason. They signed back, and they also re-signed Melo as well. So that team is going to be loaded this year. I think Portland can contend for the West, and I genuinely believe that. I don't think they're better than the Lakers or the Clippers. I don't even know if they're better than the Suns. I'm just kidding. But I think Portland is a contender for the Western Conference Finals, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far, only because just last season we saw them struggle, to battle for an 8 seed. So I do really like their offseason. I do agree. I think that these Derrick Jones is really good. Signing Melo for the vet minimum was good. Robert Covington, you highlighted that. That was great. So I think they will be good. But I wanted to, and I know we're moving around a lot, I want to talk about one last signing, and this goes into the reigning NBA champions, the Los Angeles Lakers. I wanted to talk about them signing the 6th man of the year, Montrezl Harrell, for 2 years, $19 million. And this goes into kind of a strange, problem. I don't know if it's a problem necessarily, but in my eyes, it kind of is. Because when you're looking at, and it's a problem in every sports league, but you're looking at teams like Charlotte paying Gordon Hayward $30 million a year, and then you have Los Angeles paying the 6th man of the year, less than $10 million a season. It's unbelievable to me. And I guess I get it. He's signing for less to, contend for a title. But that's like an insanely low amount of money for a guy who is going to be a fantastic, fantastic player for this team. And he's an upgrade over Dwight Howard, I'll tell you that. So, I mean, good on them for doing that. But I don't know. I just find it's frustrating as a small market, a fan of a small market team to watch players sign for so much less, really good players too. So, it's just something I want to touch on. I don't know if you guys want to talk about it at all.
Just to build off that,
Yeah.
I thought that signing was really interesting because I remember reading the reports that he was going to leave and command big money elsewhere. I know there was debate in Miami whether or not to give Bam the contract that they did today.
Glad they did.
And they would consider giving Harrell a 1-year big money deal. I also thought it was interesting that he ended up spurning the Clippers for the crosstown rival, the Lakers.
Yeah, very interesting.
Very, very interesting, I think, as well. And for the money too, I think he could have gotten a lot more money elsewhere. Maybe that's his plan next year, because I do believe it is a player option after this year. One thing, I really do like that signing, and you got to say that that's a good signing for the Lakers.
Yeah.
But I do think Harrell is a guy who needs a guard to play with. You saw in LA, Lou Williams was the guy that he was always playing with, and those two had major success on the court. I think Schroeder or LeBron could be that guy, but I'm interested to see if he comes off the bench and he's playing with the bench unit. I'm interested to see who their point guard off the bench is going to be now that Rondo's gone. I thought Rondo would have been a perfect fit there. But now not bringing him back, I would assume it'd have to be one of Schroeder or LeBron on the court with him at the same time. But if it's not, it's going to be interesting to see how that signing goes. I do think perfect backup for Anthony Davis. I think that'll also help give Davis some time on the bench is if you have Montrezl Harrell coming in behind him. Allow him to rest a little bit, especially with the short off season too. In the first month of the season, we're going to see how that goes with their adjustment. But very interesting signing to say the least on a cheap deal to the defending champs.
Yeah, I don't know, Trevor, if you have any
I
final
absolutely
thoughts.
love the signing. The Lakers are going to win the championship again this year. They got better in the offseason and they already won a championship. And I also want to shout out LeBron because we've talked about guys like Rajon Rondo and Dwight Howard on this podcast, and those guys were has-been nothings before they went to the Lakers. And that shows you the power of LeBron James. LeBron James created free agent value for guys like Rajon Rondo, guys like Dwight Howard, guys like Contavious Caldwell-Pope. And that's just the power of what LeBron James can do. And now you bring in a really good player in Montrezl Harrell and another really good player in Dennis Schroeder with Anthony Davis, with Kyle Kuzma, with Alex Caruso, with Caldwell-Pope. This Lakers team is pretty stacked. Between them and Brooklyn, I don't know who has a better roster right now, but it's close. And the Lakers, they're going to be a tough out this year. I think they're winning it all again.
Yeah,
That's an interesting debate. Quickly, yeah. I do think I would lean towards the Nets roster over the Lakers at the moment, which might be a little bit of a hot take, but if they can stay healthy, I love the pieces that they have around there. Yes. And then also, I think if they traded those away for James Harden, that would be a terrible decision.
I agree with that as well.
Right there.
Yeah, I don't know if Trevor. I don't know if we mentioned that on the last podcast. Harden not.
I
think we did. Harden not fitting in Brooklyn. Trevor and I both did say, Jack, that we thought that was a little bit of a weird rumor going around. Like it wouldn't really fit.
Yeah, from an entertainment value fan perspective, I want that trade to happen in the worst way because I would love to see how three top 15 NBA players play together like that, maybe even top 10.
Yep.
But yeah, for Brooklyn, they have Karis LeVert, Dinwiddie, Allen, Joe Harris. They have a lot of good role players. And you saw guys like Karis LeVert in particular in the bubble really show out and show what he can do.
Yeah.
That game against Portland where it came down to that last shot, I think he had like 38 points or something like that. He was unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's going to be the fourth best player on his team this year. So that just shows you how good Brooklyn really is.
Yep.
But yeah, from a fan's perspective, it's hard not to want those three to play together. I just think it'd be really fun to watch them.
Agreed. I do think also, I think Harden and KD could play together. I'm a little skeptical more so about Harden and Kyrie being able to play together. I feel like they're both ball dominant, and I don't know if that would work. But
yeah,
it was an interesting thought.
If I'm the Nets, I would try and trade Kyrie for Harden because I think Harden's a better player and would work better with. I'm not saying straight up because I don't think he should be able to do that.
Okay.
But yeah, if I'm the Nets and I'm trying to get Harden, I would shop Kyrie in that deal. That way you don't have to give up as many young assets like Dinwiddie and Harris and LeVert and all them. Maybe you give them Kyrie and a couple draft picks, and there you go. I think the Nets become the championship favorites if they do that for Harden.
Sure. Yeah, I'll say real quick. I just think the Nets are. I'd go with them right now. I mean, I agree with Jack. I think that it's really hard to go back to back. It's really, really hard to do in the NBA. You can't doubt LeBron, but I really like, as long as KD's 100% coming back from this injury, I really like the roster. And as long as Kyrie behaves in the locker room and doesn't, become a sort of crybaby like he did in the end of his tenure in Cleveland. And in Boston as well. It's seemingly really strange. Boston plays well without him, and he realizes like, oh wow, I'm not needed, and he just forces his way. He just leaves. It's very strange, the mindset of some of these guys. But we won't get too into that. We'll see what happens. We will definitely talk more NBA in the next few weeks and the next few months. But with that, guys, I think we want to move on, if that's okay, to the NFL. And, there was so much going on in the NBA. We almost forget there was a full slate of NFL games this weekend. But before we get into specific games, I wanted to talk about something just a little bit different, a little bit, in regards to one specific division. I want to talk about the NFC East. So this division has been historically terrible this year. With the Eagles, Washington, the Giants, and the Cowboys all being really, really, really bad ever since that Prescott injury. It just all went downhill. And I wanted to ask you guys, I'll start with Trevor, if that's okay. Trevor, who do you think right now, who would you pick to win the NFC East?
This is going to come off as a little bit of a bold selection, but I'm actually going to go with the New York Giants to win the NFC East, which
Wow.
might sound absolutely insane, but in my opinion, the New York Giants are the best coached team in this division. I think Joe Judge is an excellent head coach. They're 3-7, but they play hard every week, and they're getting better as the season progresses. And I look at their schedule. Their schedule, I mean, it's not. I take that back. Their schedule's kind of,
Yeah.
but they start with the Bengals, which I think they'll beat without Joe Burrow, so that gets them to 4-7. They still have to play the Cowboys at the end of the year, and then in between that, they have to play 4 playoff teams. So that's going to be tough. But in my opinion, 6 wins might win this division outright. I honestly believe that. So if the Giants can beat the Bengals, the Cowboys, and then one of these 4 teams, the Seahawks, Cardinals, Browns, Ravens, that's not going to be easy to do. If they can win one of those games, I think they might be able to win this division at 6-10. We'll see. They're a well-coached team. They're getting better every week. I don't know. I have a gut feeling the Giants might take this.
Yeah, I mean, Jack, what are your thoughts?
That's very interesting. My second team is the Giants, so I'd love that. I'm a little skeptical of them. I think that they're a year away. I do love Joe Judge and what he's done. Also, another thing about the Giants, they've competed in a lot of games this year that they've lost that they really should have won. That first game against Philadelphia, they were up big. If Evan Ingram catches that ball that hits his fingertips, they win that game. They really should have beat Dallas with, I think they still had Dak Prescott that game.
He got hurt
For
that
most
game,
of
I
that
believe.
game,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They end up losing that game by 3, even though they were up like 3 scores, I think, in the first half. They were up big early. And then Tampa Bay, too, a good team, a playoff team. They played them really tough, and I think they were a 2-point conversion away from tying that game up. But I don't know. I don't know if this is their year yet. They might be another year away, another year of Joe Judge. So I'm a little skeptical of them. I just feel like, as much as it pains me to say it, now that Andy Dalton's back, I feel like the Dallas Cowboys are just going to get a little bit hot. And by hot, I really only mean win 3 or 4.
Sure.
But I mean, if you're looking at the quarterbacks in this division, Carson Wentz hasn't really done much since that ACL injury he had. Daniel Jones is still unproven. Alex Smith coming off an injury. He's solid, but he's a check down guy. He's not anything special. Andy Dalton's been a winning quarterback in this league, and he's taken his team close to the playoffs in the past. So
Yeah.
I really think I have to give the edge to him and Zeke and that wild offense that they have. I just don't really have faith in any of these teams, to be honest. I do agree with Trevor that 6-10 or 6-9-1 or whatever it's going to be might end up winning the division, which would be ridiculous. But if I had to pick a team right now, I'd have to pick the Dallas Cowboys, as much as it pains me to say.
Yeah. Listen, I do kind of agree with Jack. I'm gonna go with a different team in a second, but I do want to point out that the Cowboys do have, probably the best remaining schedule. I mean, they play Washington, then they play Baltimore, then they play Cincinnati, they play San Francisco, who is so injured that they can be beaten by the Cowboys. They play the Eagles and the Giants. They have 3 divisional games left, where most of the teams I think only have 2 left, so that's a nice position to be in. And then the only really difficult game is versus the Ravens. And all the other games are pretty winnable. So, yeah, they probably have the best remaining schedule. But, I kind of want to, I'm going to be bold here. I'm going to go with a different team than both of you. I'm actually going to take Washington here. And this is a really bold decision. And Trevor's shaking his head no. But I'm going to tell you why that they shouldn't be counted out. How do you win games outside of the Chiefs in the NFL? You have a really solid defense, okay? This Washington team has a really solid defense. Their D-line is one of the best in the league. It's
Their
top.
quarterback has 1 functioning leg.
It's top. Wow, that's rude. He's comeback player of the year. Top 3 D-line in the NFL. Chase Young leading that D-line. You saw him against the Bengals. I feel really, really bad for Joe Burrow. But I mean, that D-line is so ferocious. And they're just they can't be stopped by even the best O-lines in football. So I really, really like that. Their secondary has actually stepped up really well. Receivers do not play well against them. They're very tough to move the ball against. They really are. And their offense is not good. Don't get me wrong. But if Alex Smith can continue to limit the turnovers, right? Antonio Gibson is a really solid runner. He's running the ball well this year. J.D. McKissic is a nice pass catcher out of the backfield. You have Terry McLaurin leading this receiving core, who he's a really good player. Terry McLaurin is a top 15 receiver in this league, probably going to be top 10 in future years. I think this division is so bad. If they can win their 2 division games against the Cowboys and the Eagles, I think that they can win this division if they beat the Panthers and the Niners. I really think they can. So I think that the path is there. I think if that defense continues to play the way it does, I wouldn't count Washington out. So that that's just my
That's
take.
going to be the key: is which team plays the best in the division over the
Yeah.
next
I agree.
6-7 weeks that we have left. That's going to be the key.
What's
And those
ironic-
are the
Oh, my bad. Go ahead. Sorry.
those are the games that you're playing the teams with the worst records. Those are going to be the most winnable games out of those.
And
Yep.
it's weird. It looks like they all play, or most of them have to play Cincinnati. So to build off Jack a little bit, it's going to come down to who can beat Cincinnati and who can win their divisional games. It's ironic that none of us picked the Eagles, who are actually leading the division by half a game right now. So clearly no one here has faith in Carson Wentz or that roster. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's
I
killed
mean,
my fantasy.
that's kind of a story for another time. But Wentz has been. I think we can agree. Wentz has been really disappointing. Like, he's been really bad. I watched him against the Browns. He was just. He's not looking at wide open receivers. He has receivers across the field that are wide open, just throwing it. He has tunnel vision, just throwing it into double coverage or like extremely tight coverage. Is just not. He's just not good. It's really sad to see. But I mean, if it's okay, we can move on to a few games that we wanted to talk about before ending this podcast. With the first being the Chiefs and the Raiders. So I wanted to talk about this game because it was a really close game. It was a really close game again, and the Raiders are the only team to beat the Chiefs, I believe, in the last. I don't know if it's exactly right. Like, it's like the 15 or last 16 games, I believe, or something like that. They're the only team to beat them. And I think that's telling. I think that the Raiders are a team to look out for if they make the playoffs this year. And it's very competitive in the AFC. But if they're able to sneak in, I think they're a team to watch out for because they have done a really good job. John Gruden's done a great job, coaching up this team. Derek Carr looked lost in past years. A lot of people were talking, should he still be the starter? And I said, you know what? A lot of people are disrespecting him. A lot of people are saying he's not the guy. I said, you know what? You should give him one more shot. And Gruden seemingly has straightened him out. I mean, he's done a really nice job. He's not doing anything crazy. He's not like an elite quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but he puts together long, sustained drives. And that's really, really key against a team like the Chiefs, a team like the Ravens. Keep that offense off the field. And that's what the Raiders do extremely well. They pound the ball. Derek Carr, great at the short, intermittent passes. And it works really well, and it's efficient, and they score a lot. So I think that this is a team really to look out for, not only this year, but in future years. So I really like what they've done, and I really don't think there's much to say about the Chiefs other than, like, this offense is insane. They can score at will, and I think the only notable thing here is that they give up a lot of points. Again, they've been giving up a lot of points, kind of inconsistently this season. So it's kind of a worry because their pass defense was a strength last year. And it's part of the reason they won the Super Bowl. But I mean, they're just fine. They're 9-1. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this game.
Trevor, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say watching that game, that looked like a playoff game. And that didn't look like a wild card game. That looked like a divisional, even maybe AFC championship game. That was some high level football, particularly on the offense. And Ryan, you made a great point about Derek Carr. And I actually heard this during the broadcast. When John Gruden came in, he apparently told Derek Carr, I'm going to build you up from scratch. And they basically rewired everything that Derek Carr does as a quarterback. And it took 2 full years. John Gruden's first year, they went 4-12. Last year, they went 7-9. And now they're 6-4, and they're better than what their record indicates. They've had a really hard schedule and still 6-4. Mm-hmm. And I just thought this was an entertaining game. Derek Carr matched Patrick Mahomes throw for throw. Oakland's secondary is a mess, but that will be something I'm sure they address in the offseason. Their defense as a whole is not very good. They don't really have that good of a pass rush. They have a couple nice young players in the secondary, and Abrams and Damon Arnett, but they're young. They've made a lot of mistakes. But overall, this Raiders team is vastly improved. We know what Kansas City is. They're virtually unstoppable on the offensive end, and it's funny because their defense really isn't that good, and they're still going to probably win the Super Bowl this year. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. It just shows you how good Patrick Mahomes is, how good that wide receiving core is, how good Kelsey is. And now they have a running game too. So this Chiefs offense is unstoppable. I love what I've seen from Oakland, and that was just a fantastic game from start to finish.
Yeah, I gotta echo the same thing. I loved watching that game. Surprisingly, I do this pick 'em through my dad's work, and I was one of the few people who ended up taking the Raiders to win that game. So I was excited when it came down to the end, and then Mahomes threw that touchdown with like 30 seconds left or whatever. That kind of crushed me. But I think I really do love this Raiders team. They're a very good team. They've obviously, like you said, they beat the Chiefs. They played them tough on Sunday. They also beat the Saints, I think, on the road on Monday Night Football this year.
Yeah, I think
Maybe
that's right.
it was at home,
No, I
but
think you're right.
They beat him at home.
Oh,
it was at home. Okay, but
Yeah.
still,
But
like
they
that
beat
kind of that was their coming out party to me, honestly. Like, wow, this team is really legit. They're a very good football team. John Gruden's a great coach. I did hear the rewiring part that Trevor was talking about, and I think watching Derek Carr, he looked like he was in complete control that entire game. He knew exactly what the Chiefs were doing before every play. He was calling it out. I loved how silent the stadium was, so you could hear him and Mahomes talking the whole time. That was pretty neat. But yeah, I think they're a good team. They got a good offensive line. They have a good running back in Josh Jacobs. They have weapons too. I really love Darren Waller. He's a great asset at tight end and probably their best receiver, I would say. I do think they're probably one Nelson Aguilar catch away from winning that game. They were up at one point, forget if it was 4 or 7, but they throw a deep ball to Aguilar, it just goes off his fingertips. I think if he catches that ball, they could go up 2 scores in the fourth quarter and probably end up winning that game. But I think this is a well-coached team. I think this is a team that knows how to compete and work hard every week. And I think you can't bet against Gruden. I do think that this will be a playoff team.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't know. With that, I wanted to move on to another game. And Trevor, this was one of your games. Take it away. Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals. This time, Trevor, the Seahawks got the best of the Cardinals. What happened?
Tears.
What
Tears,
happened?
Very sad game. I was watching with some buddies. I don't know where to start with this game because it was just overall depression. I'm just kind of.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. Seattle's defense. Actually, I'll start with this. It looked like a Thursday night game. It was sloppy. There was a lot of injuries, and I'm going to petition this right now. The NFL should get rid of Thursday night games. I hate Thursday night games. They're sloppy. You have no time to prepare. There's a ton of injuries because guys can't fully heal from the Sunday before. So let's just start with that. Thursday night games should just permanently go away. To get to the actual game, though, it looked like a sloppy playoff game between two teams that if they played this game on Sunday would have been a lot cleaner and a lot more fun to watch. Kyler's injury early in that game, that shoulder thing definitely affected him. I don't want to make excuses because he didn't look very good, but that shoulder injury was definitely an issue throwing the ball, particularly was on his throwing shoulder. Seattle's defense looked pretty good. Eden said that Seattle has no defense. They had defense on that Thursday night game. Carlos Dunlap was huge for them. Jamal Adams was a very nice player for them on that Thursday night as well. And they got the stops when they needed to. And I'm going to highlight that final sack by Carlos Dunlap on that 4th and 10 play. That was a huge play that could change a team's fortune, for the rest of the season. I don't know what else to say about the Cardinals. I'm a little disappointed that we lost. Overall, we need to clean up the penalties. And can somebody please cut Dre Kirkpatrick? I want that guy permanently banned from Arizona. I don't ever want to see that guy in the state of Arizona ever again. That 15-yard penalty where he tried to fight DK Metcalf leads to a touchdown. He can't cover anybody. I hate Dre Kirkpatrick. I'll leave it at that. But as a Cardinals fan, one final point. Sorry, I'm taking a long time on this.
That's okay.
These next 2 games are critical. We go at New England this Sunday. That's a trap game. We do not historically play well in those early time East Coast games. And then we play the Rams. Those are 2 games where if we potentially lose both of those, we're 6-6. And I'd be a little bit nervous about making the playoffs at that point. So I think these next 2 weeks are huge as a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, Jack,
Yeah,
do you want to have any thoughts on this game?
I agree. I think these next two games are our biggest games of the season.
Mm.
Can't lie, I'm not a little nervous. I'm a little nervous for the New England game.
Me too.
We didn't necessarily look great in that Jets game that we played earlier this year either.
Sheesh.
But yeah, I'm nervous for the early start on the East Coast against a Belichick coach team who lost last week. Little nervous about that. The Thursday night game, there was more defense than I thought that was going to be played that night. Especially on a Thursday night game too. I was sitting there thinking, if I was a betting man, which I am, but I didn't bet on this game, I would have taken the over if it was 60 points. Like, I thought there was going to be an absurd amount, and there really just wasn't. So, like Trevor said, I think the Kyler injury did affect him a little bit. I think the Cardinals did make some mistakes. Kirkpatrick made a few mistakes. Patrick Peterson didn't look like Patrick Peterson in week 7.
Mm-hmm.
I also think we somehow escaped with a win in that week 7 game. I didn't think it was going to happen on the road either. But honestly, I mean, we have the talent to compete with them, and I think we have a better defense than them, honestly. And that's how we'd have to win a game, is we'd have to play better than them on the defensive end, which we really just didn't do in this game. So I think
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan. I think healthy, we're a better defensive team. I think losing Chandler Jones was a huge and the most underrated loss in the entire NFL.
Wow,
Because Chandler
with the
Jones
NFL.
in the last 5 years has led the entire NFL in sacks, more than Khalil Mack, Nick Bosa, all those guys. Losing him has killed our pass rush. And another underrated loss on the defensive line was our defensive tackle Jordan Phillips. And you saw
and
Seattle
Corey Peters too. Don't forget about Corey Peters.
In Seattle, they were able to run the ball against us. And people have been talking about how Seattle's had no run game this year. They found the run game on Thursday night. And I think that was attributed to some of our injuries and the lack of preparation and whatnot. But I agree with everything with what you just said, Jack. I will say the only good news out of this game is, as bad as we looked on both sides of the ball, and the defense was okay, but offense, we didn't look good. We were sloppy. We made a lot of mistakes. I thought there were some bad calls as well in that game that went against us, but hey, that's part of the NFL. We were right there at the end, down by 7, inside their 20-yard line. We needed to make 1 or 2 more plays, and that game goes to overtime, and who knows what happens. So as a Cardinals fan, it's encouraging that we were this close when we didn't look very good. But going forward, we got to clean it up, and we got to win one of these next 2 games.
Yeah, so for me, this game, I'll be brief. I think that the problem is simple. I think the problem is when correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, is Kyler Murray the Cardinals' leading rusher on the season? I'm sorry, this might be
It
incorrect.
might be Kenyon Drake.
Okay, but regardless, this run game has struggled. I think it's been inconsistent, to say the least, and I think it's important, and I think this happened in a few other games this season, and I've talked about on the podcast. It's important to have some semblance of balance, and when you're averaging 3 yards a carry in a game against a bad defense like Seattle, I think that's just going to make it tough on your quarterback, and your quarterback is playing with a shoulder injury. And it's going to be very difficult to pull a game out when the defense knows they'll be able to stop your run, and they know they're going to force a hurt quarterback to throw the ball. So it's just tough. I mean, for any team, and it made it tough for the Cardinals. They almost pulled it out, regardless. But I just think that was a tough thing to overcome. And second, I want to see them, and this might be a product of a few different things, but I just feel like with DeAndre Hopkins on your team, I want to see him get a little bit more than 5 catches against a really bad defense. I know he had 8 targets. I know, it's not good to force feed a player like the Browns try to do with OBJ. I think that doesn't work. But I think that Kingsbury's a good enough play caller where he can get him the ball in a non-forcible way. And I think that's important to the Cardinals' success on offense. That's just my
One final point, Ryan. Final point. I
Yeah,
think that was a great point about DeAndre Hopkins. I think if DeAndre Hopkins is one-on-one, and you do that, if you're Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, I'm looking at him the whole time. Even if he's not open, he's open. He's big. He's physical. So I'd be trying to force feed DeAndre Hopkins a little bit if he's one-on-one.
Even if he's 3-on-1 throwing the ball, Trevor.
Fair point. I agree. Get DeAndre Hopkins a bit more involved and get more creative in the damn run game. I mean, we're in shotgun a lot, but it's a lot of just like straight handoffs up the middle. I would like to see a little bit of some more smoke and mirrors. Get Christian Kirk in motion, get him an end around. Maybe I know they have a few design runs for Kyler Murray, but call some read options. They do it a couple times a game, but call some read, mix up the run game a little bit, get a little bit more creative, and try and confuse the defense a little bit. Just handing the ball off up the middle every time when you call a run is not very creative and not very hasn't been very successful.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll see what happens with this upcoming Sunday and the games on Thanksgiving Day. It's gonna be a fun week, and then it's gonna be a fun end of the NFL season. We'll see how the last 6 weeks go. See if the Cardinals or the Browns or both can make the playoffs. It'll be fun. But with that, I think that just about wraps it up. I mean, it was a nice podcast, a long podcast, great podcast with a lot of good stuff going on. Just want to thank Jack for coming on. It's good having you back. It's been a while. I'm glad we got you on for the NBA analysis in particular. That was good stuff.
Thank you guys. I'm happy to be here anytime.
Yeah, of course. And with that, we'll be back. We'll be back next week, right, Trevor?
Yes, sir. Let's catch a Suns game this year, right? How's that sound?
There you go. That sounds good. All right, we'll be back next week with another podcast. We'll see you guys later.